Well, wow, thank you guys for coming out. This is amazing. As I'm thinking about this whole subject of voodoo, Vodou, Congo sorcery, I always kind of ask myself, why is a white guy from Utah so interested in this? I mean, it's a little weird, but what it comes down to for me is I always say that you really ought to trace your roots back as far as you can and get into really the religion of your ancestors, the spirituality of your ancestors, and there's something powerful that travels in that. In that way, we know biologically that all human life started in Africa, and migrated out from there. Everything that we are started there, and we've brought a lot of that into our culture. We still have a lot of that root in Africa and in that form of spirituality. You can actually see, the more you study what happened in ancient times in Africa, the more you actually see that's still in play. For instance, they were using the symbol of a cross long before Christianity was ever around. They're finding this in Africa in a lot of these stone structures. And they're going, wait a minute. At first they thought this must be from Christian explorers. But when they actually started doing carbon dating, they found out no, that it developed autonomously there. And we can see that in a lot of stuff, specifically in the practical rituals that you can do to actually affect this world with spirituality. And so I want to give you a little backstory in history of how this kind of spread around the world, really, specifically with voodoo and Vodou. Most of what we know about it comes from right here, which is the Republic of Benin, is what it's now called. It used to be called Dahomey, and it's one of those in Africa. A lot of the states and nations there actually changed quite a bit. So it's gone through several names, but it's right here in this square that you can see. Just a little tip of it, right on the border of the Congo, and the Zulu religion was pretty predominant there, and it really dealt with a good deal of worship of almost a pandeism, where a spirit of godhood that inhabits everything, and so they could see that with even the dirt itself being inhabited by God, that by doing these pretty simple rituals that you could actually invoke that and use that power in your daily life. We also know that a good deal, because interestingly, that's kind of where we've got the Congo, and it's kind of funneled into here as far as civilization went, as far as people actually gathering together and having a political structure in a major way. And that was taken advantage of massively, not only by Europeans who came there for slave trade, but also the rulers of that place, Dahomey, were selling out the people. They were actually making more profit off of the slave trade than the Europeans were. And so you look at that and you go, well, the real effect of that, though, is that they actually took the slaves and would take them just about everywhere. I'm really focused on Haiti for a few reasons. And I'll get into those, but that's one of the big places the lot of slaves went was Haiti and South America, Central America, parts of Northern America. But where they went, we had what's called, and it's a diaspora, which basically means a scattering. That these tribes and these people from that specific part of Africa spread everywhere. And it created syncretism, which basically is that they would take their religion and just start merging it with the native religions. In Haiti, it started merging with French occultism and Catholicism pretty heavily, which is why we see that the saints are linked up with the Haitian or the original Congo gods and deities. And kind of called them different names and worshipped them and used them in different ways, basically to kind of fit in with that culture. And you know, it's put out there a lot that they did that to oppose or to kind of hide the religion inside of the religion that was acceptable at the time. I don't think that that's entirely the case, because we also see when we get into to North and South America that they actually didn't just merge with the predominant violent culture, which would be the European descent of Christianity, but also with the native polytheism. So with the native religion as well, you see that really strongly in a lot of the Brazilian forms. Quincamba and Santeria was from Cuba, and you see that they started really merging with the Native American beliefs and practices, and it's really something that's going to happen pretty naturally. Of course, being able to cover up your worship and your religion by using the name of saints and of Christian icons does help for sure, but it's also a natural kind of merger that took place. We can even see where in the Middle East, and this isn't really hardly ever talked about when we talk about the slave trade, everyone's always, obviously assuming that it's coming to America and to the areas around here, but it actually went all over the world, to Asia, to parts of Russia, and then to the Middle East, and you can see pretty strongly that rather than a merger and a syncretism that occurred in the Middle East where Islam is predominant, that Islam just completely bulldozed their religion entirely, and there really was no merger at all. That you have a huge amount of people that basically left the African religion behind and went full force into Islam. And where they would go, the religion with that syncretism would actually take on a lot of really kind of unique characteristics, and it basically started developing almost like hybrids of the Congo religion and the native religion, or whatever religion they were with, and it really took on different forms. We can see in the Vodou came from Haiti. That once again it was a merger between the African religion, the French occultism, and Catholicism. Candomblé is from Brazil. Kimbanda is from Brazil. And one thing about Brazil is it not only is it huge, but it's got a huge population as well. So geographically and with population, it's a pretty big place. And so depending on where they would go, you can see a lot of different forms of this diasporic practice all over Brazil. And they're pretty clearly defined against one another. If you go to a Santeria church or practice, you can see that it's pretty clearly different from Candomblé. And Santeria is largely Cuban. Now, with voodoo, because that's the word people commonly know. When I'll say things about Vodou, they go, "Don't you mean voodoo?" Well, no, voodoo is strictly an American thing. It's really been in existence pretty short term in comparison to everything else, and it's really, not only is it a newer religion, so to speak, but it's also pretty washed out, kind of whitewashed. It doesn't retain a good amount of the original African religion to give you a good feel for what they were originally about. But yeah, and you can see with Jamaica, Cuba, basically you can highlight a map and you'll see just bright spots everywhere left and right as to where these religions popped up. And an interesting thing is that besides when they went with the Islamic religion completely wiping out the African religion and spirituality, besides that one example, we see that the African religion and spirituality actually thrived pretty clearly, and it really has a strong root in the people who follow it, and just about everybody who steps onto the path of Vodou or any of these African-derived religions really feel like it resonates in a really deep way, in a really fundamental way that most religions just don't. And I think the reason for that is that your average religion today really preaches that there's a separation between your spirit and your body, and that you're going to have lusts of the flesh, and they will always contradict lusts of the spirit or desires of the spirit. The African religion doesn't have that at all. They're completely enmeshed. That sex, drug use, anything that would be considered in Christian society to be immoral was actually a celebrated part of their religion. That they really celebrated what it is to be human. Now the pantheon. And I was going to tell you why I focused really strictly on Haiti. It didn't have nearly as much of the Native American or the native tribe influence, so it was able to retain, I think, more of the original African feel and spirit to the religion, whereas a lot of them kind of, I think the syncretism was a little too much, and the merger was a little too strong. That it's really hard to look at it and see the African roots and see where those end and the Native American practices begin. And so that's why I focus on Vodou, which is the practice from Haiti. And so I want to go over the pantheon real quick, just kind of give you an idea of what they worship and how they kind of configure the hierarchy of their spiritual dimension. And it's really an interesting story because it's quite a bit different than just about anything else that's told out there in any other religion. That they have, and you can see a lot of the names in Vodou are Creole or French, and that's just illustrating the huge impact that actually French occultism had, because even though the Catholic religion was strong there was an even stronger French occultism. When people started getting word of what was going on in Haiti with these slaves and the rituals they were doing, French occultists just started coming over in ships as much as they could to learn from these so-called primitives how to do these spells and rituals. So they were onto something, and to this day that still is pretty much the case. When somebody wants to throw out a word to summarize doing any kind of spell work or any kind of spirituality, voodoo is probably thrown out there more than just about anything else. So they got bon Dieu, which is good God, good spirit, and that's basically the creator. Now, the myth goes that the creator created the earth, put everything in it, put people on it, and in a way he was disgusted with what he had done. Because, this isn't the perfect product, this isn't exactly what I intended, and so he kind of just left the scene, and he's like, well, whatever happens with this is really out of my hands, and he backed off from it. But before he did that, he put into play basically emissaries that would watch over the earth. And he says, I don't want to have anything to do with this, but I am responsible. And so he put Loa in charge of everything. And Loa they're basically gods of very specific natural attributes. And so, for natural elements, for human emotions, that they had one of these deities pretty much for everything that you can imagine in existence. And they were basically given all of the power of God the Creator, and just basically said, do what you want. Live here, watch over everything, don't let it go to hell too much, but pretty much you've got my complete power. Now, it's separated here into a few different categories, and these categories came about only through the syncretism with Catholicism. That originally in Africa, it was just known that there were spirits. There wasn't any real, these spirits are good or bad or more or less violent. It was just spirits, and you use them how you use them. But as the syncretism really set in, they started to kind of adopt some of the dualistic mindset that Catholics were really, that they were picking up in that syncretism. Now, the Radal Loa are what you'd call, I guess, the more benevolent of the Loa. That they're the spirits that are going to be more helpful, more guiding, and related kind of to the right-hand path and the good side of things. The Pedro Loa are the more violent, and you can you can still work with them. You don't necessarily need to be a black magician, an evil person to work with Pedro Loa, but they exist more for doing things than just for guiding. They exist for more aggressive acts, and they do rule over that black magic aspect. To be clear, though, if you're working as a hungan or a sorcerer priest in Haiti, you're going to use both. Nobody who really knows what they're doing only uses, I'm only going to do good spells. It's realized that nature and humans are both good and evil, and we encompass just about everything, and so they're going to use whatever's called for. And we have the Gedes, which the Gedes are the dead. And so we have really only a couple classes there, and that's the spirits of the dead, so a person who has passed on, and their soul is basically governed by the actual Gede lords, the Baron Samedi and Baron Cemetery and Baron Criminel are the three Gede lords. And they're kind of put in their own separate category, because the dead are almost thought to be completely separate from the Loa. That once they've passed over, they're not really fully in the realm of the living and in the realm that the Loa govern, but they are under the governance of the Gede lords. One of the really interesting things I saw, because once again, it's really easy to look at this religion from the surface and think, well, it's just kind of a primitive religion. There's really not much to it. It's making dolls and poking them. But when you actually get into it and you really study it, you see that there's a lot to it. And this is part of it. In Western religion and culture, we kind of have this understanding that you have your body and your soul, and that's it. But when you get into the more ancient religions, you actually find that they kind of understood the differences between the different parts of your spiritual anatomy. And the first is the corpse cadaver, the physical body, the physical substance. And I should note that once again, there's no separation in this religion between your body and your soul. That they're one and the same. They're merged together, and really the only difference between any of these are really the function it serves, not necessarily that, once again, there's no war between the spirit and the flesh at all. We have the Naame, which is the spirit of the flesh. So the only way that we can really understand this in our vocabulary is to basically say that it's the energetic resonance that comes from our biology, that we have electromagnetic energy, bioelectrical energy that's always pulsing off of us, and that's the Naame. That it's just that energetic essence that surrounds us, and you can view it as an aura, and that's basically what that is. Then you've got the Gross and the Ti Bonanga, and Bonanga is good angel, and Gross is large, and Ti is small. And once again, this is Creole, so they've taken their original language, taken a little bit of English and a lot of French, and kind of slaughtered them all together, and came up with this language. The Gross Bonanga is basically what most people in the West would call your soul. It's what you are that will move on after you die. Whereas the Ti Bonanga is it's more like your in Hinduism they'd call it your samsaric consciousness. So it's the identification, it's the ego part of yourself, the identification of yourself as a person with a very specific emotional, psychological, and physical attributes. Whereas the Gross Bonanga doesn't have that. It doesn't have a de-identification with the whole. And I think that's really where you get into the difference with it, is with the Gross Bonanga, that is still so intricately connected with the divine and with the whole collective consciousness, whereas the Ti Bonanga is not. It's kind of confined into yourself and seeing yourself as separate from your environment. This is the most interesting, because not too many people that I've talked to can really sum up what this part of your soul is, but it's always mentioned, it's always put there, and it just kind of has a little footnote of the Star of Destiny. And so it's the Zetwa. And basically what that is it's your destiny. In Hinduism, once again, you would refer to that as your dharma. It's the thing that you are that you are able to do that no other person can do. That you're put here or you're in existence for one particular reason or several reasons, and that nobody else can kind of fill that niche. So interestingly, though, they don't put that as an external thing like this is your destiny. No, this is part of who you are. That what you are supposed to do is as integral a part of who you are as your physical body is. I'm kind of running through these. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. And now we've got to kind of touch on how they view the spiritual universe. And once again, we've got a really pretty dualistic view of it, where we've got the world of matter and the world of spirit. And they kind of have something similar, but they see a definite overlap. That we've got Earth, we've got the physical existence, Guinea, which is basically the spirit world in a way, but it still overlaps into this world pretty clearly, where there's not really a point where this world stops and the world of spirit begins. That they're completely overlapping. And then the Gede, which is the land of the dead. And there's not a whole lot that's known about that. Most people, when they're doing any kind of spiritual work within the Vodou system, are just going to work with Earth and Guinea. You can call the spirits of the dead. You can deal with your ancestors, but it's not one of those things that a lot of people dwell on. What's going on in Gede for some reason, but they're much more concerned about the Earth and the overlap of the spiritual worlds. One interesting point with this is that there was a good deal of emphasis on what's happening in this world. Even though they do believe in an afterlife, it always comes back to what's going on now, what kind of change and effect can we have here and now in our lives, rather than suffering and sacrificing for something beyond the grave. That's really not a huge concept of doing something for some kind of reward in the afterlife. Now, to get into kind of more of the practical aspects of Vodou is, and I've talked here before about evocation, and I really talk a lot about evocation. It's one of my favorite subjects, which is the calling forth of a spirit into visible materialization, that you can interact with it as one person interacts with another, and even coerce it or convince it to do things for you in this world. The Loa, though, aren't called forth, but they're called down. And what that basically means is that they're not entities that you're going to call up and have assume a body and then start telling that embodiment to go do things for you or to give you information. You're going to call it down into the general area, and there's going to be a possession of some sort. Possession is linked in with Vodou so strongly that you wouldn't have Vodou at all were it not for possession. Possession is basically the key that makes it work. There are obviously several different types of possession. You'll have object possession, where a Loa can possess an object. You'll do that with altars, with ritual tools, any kind of spiritual devices that you're using are going to be possessed by the spirit of the Loa. And basically its power is going to flow into that. Its consciousness will flow into that. And once again, this comes from the idea that God is in everything. That it's not necessarily a being so much as it is a presence that is omnipresent. And so being able to have a conversation with a tree before you cut it down and make an altar out of it is not an odd concept to people who are immersed in Vodou, because the trees can talk because they have consciousness, and so you would take that and that's initial possession, and then you increase that possession by actually calling a Loa down into it. It'll inhabit that, not only its energy but its consciousness as well. And it'll inhabit that object. Just about all spell work and ritual work that happens in Vodou has an element of object possession, that you're taking whatever object you're using that symbolizes the goal that you want to have, and you're possessing that with a very specific Loa that's going to bring that about. And you have area possession, and that's extremely general, that you're going to call the spirit down, and once again, rather than it assuming a body, it will have an essence, a force that kind of falls like a blanket in the general area. For this reason, if there's people getting possessed, two people in the same area can easily be possessed by the same spirit. That there's not necessarily, well, it's only going to be in one place, because it's a blanket of consciousness and power that possesses the whole area. And then you'll have animal possession. And I'll talk in a minute about animal sacrifice, and that is a big part of Vodou. But before the animal is sacrificed, it's possessed by a specific loa that you're calling, and so then when you sacrifice the animal, you'll eat it. That you're not only eating the flesh of the animal, you're eating the flesh of the loa that that has possessed that, and so then you're taking that into yourself. And then finally, human possession. And it's pretty much known that you're not going to be able to do anything in Vodou without being possessed by a loa. That the idea is that we, as humans, just don't possess what it takes to do the miraculous, but the loa do. And so if they fill us, if they guide our movements, if they guide our words, that's going to that we'll be literally filled with the power of the gods. So human possession is a huge part of it, and it'll happen in different stages. And I think I've actually got a slide for that. These are just some clips of different Vodou rituals. I was trying to get a really good picture of somebody possessed, but because I know in Haiti, it's not an odd thing to go into one of these rituals and have complete possession. Yeah. Right. That's a amazing point, because really, you can't have any of these without all of them being present. Oh yeah. If it's going to be impossible to call on just one loa, but basically the idea is that the loa, they're not in like some alternate universe, and they have to be called here. That they're here walking with us all the time. And so when we actually call the loa, it's not so much that we're calling them, but we're opening our awareness to their presence. And I know, and that's an excellent observation, because yeah, you can't have just one of these. You can't say, I just want to possess this object, but I don't want to be touched by the possession. It's going to affect you. It's going to affect the area. If there are animals there, it's going to affect them for sure. And animals actually react pretty intensely to the presence of any kind of spirit. And but yeah, you'll definitely have all of those in play at the same time. Now there are stages of possession as well, and these are outlined from the work of Father Dr. Malachi Martin. And he was a leading exorcist in the Catholic order of exorcists, and why I'm relying on the Catholic frame of mind for this is really for two reasons. They've studied possession more than just about any other group out there. The people in Vodou have been doing this for longer than civilizations even existed, but not really have made a scientific analysis of the whole thing, whereas the Catholics definitely have. And Father Malachi Martin was a leading exorcist and an advisor to the most, not the most recent Pope, because he's out now, but the one before him, John Paul. The first stage of possession is infestation, and basically what that means, and that's basically the area possession that I was talking about. It's just the spirit inhabiting the area. And infestation will even go as far as poltergeist activity, footsteps that you hear that aren't there, all the kind of creepy stuff that people associate with the presence of spirits. Oppression, and this is a matter of escalation. So it's not like you're going to have one of these or they'll appear. It will always escalate in this way. you'll have obsession or oppression, and that is dualistic because either you become obsessed with the spirit and its presence intensifies, or you try to back away from it, and then you find extreme oppression. And this is where people who are dealing with situations of possession are at war with themselves. They have these internal impulses or even erratic behaviors and thoughts that are in complete contradiction to their normal state. And that's basically just that they're fighting it. They're not allowing the possession, and so it kind of takes on a more violent form. I do want to say, though, that as far as Father Malachi Martin's concerned, as far as I'm concerned, and just about everybody who has really looked into the subject of possession is concerned, you can't just walk down the street and get possessed. You can't just be living life, not doing anything in the occult and get possessed. It always has to be invited and willed in some way. And so, well, you'd wonder, why does the oppression come into play then if you've willed it, if it's something that you've taken on and that you want to engage in? Well, there's obviously the fact that, especially if you haven't ever been possessed before, it's a scary experience. And so you jump into it, and then you start going, wait a minute, maybe I made a mistake, especially if you have a lot of religious influences telling you that that's wrong, or that for some reason you shouldn't be feeling those things, doing those things, etc. And then we have mounting and riding, and I kind of lump those together because it's hard to tell. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you quick. You said that you had to kind of invite it, but so say someone was doing it, like they didn't really know what they were doing, they were just kind of experimenting. You said there was like the three kind of stages, or just groups.
Yeah.
There's like the good, the bad, and then just the dead.
Right.
But if you're doing it, like say you're just doing it for the first time, is there any way that you could mix those up, or like accidentally do one or the other, not really knowing it, and kind of regret that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is one of those things where there are doors that you can open, and once they're open, stuff comes through those doors, and at that point it gets kind of hard to control, which is why whenever you're doing anything, especially with the intensity of Haitian Vodou, you want to make sure that there's somebody there that has a bit of experience that specifically in exorcism, and that's one of the huge guidelines that I got from my mentor in Vodou, was that you never go into a possession without an exorcist on hand ready to go, because you can definitely call up something, you can use the wrong symbol, you can call the wrong name, you can somehow put yourself in alliance with something that you really didn't want there.
Well, can they invite themselves, even like you invite them? Kind of thing? Like if you were trying to do like more of like just kind of more just chill kind of thing, like the good, like the better ones, and all of a sudden they just kind of flood in.
You could. For the most part, in Haitian Vodou, you're going to begin every ritual by calling on Legba, and he's basically the father of the entire thing, and so he's the most powerful, the oldest, and the wisest of the Loa. So you start by calling him, and he makes sure that everything goes according to the way it should. If you leave that out, yeah, you're opening yourself up for things, and once again, if you're playing with it and you don't really know what you're doing, it's real easy to get off base. I started studying this long before. I met Dr. DePrince, who trained me in Haitian Vodou and initiated me, and I had been playing with it before I met him for about a year, and I would call this, and I'd go, okay, well, I want to call on this guy and this guy together because I like them both, and so I do that. And it just so turns out that those two spirits are worst enemies. And so I actually experienced some pretty intense situations where people in my family started dying really, really fast. In quick succession, within a year, had 6 people that were really close to me just die of odd circumstances. And so I finally meet with Dr. DePrince, and I go, hey, while I've got you here, what do you think about this? And he goes, I'm surprised you're not dead, because you're calling on a lot of these things in the wrong order, and in the wrong context. So there's really a context that does have to be taken into consideration, or you can risk being possessed or having extremely negative reactions. one thing about this that I found, and just about everybody who really gets into this finds, is that it's real and it works. And a lot of people can chalk that up to that there's a diabolical element in there, or that it is the power and the ritual of the original gods of this planet, or whatever. But for whatever reason, it works. And so when you start playing with it, you do have to know that it's a fire, and it is able to burn you for sure. But you do have or mounting and riding, which when you're in the process of trying to get possessed, or once you're possessed, you're called a horse. That you are no longer yourself acting of your own volition, that you are being ridden by the Loa, and the Loa is just like a horse. It's getting to where it wants to go. It's doing what it wants to do through your body. And so the mounting stage will usually take on a pretty violent form of seizures and convulsions and such, where basically the Loa is trying to get control of your body, trying to wrestle it, just like if you jump on a wild horse. There's going to be a period of quite a bit of violence to try to get it there. The intensity of that mounting stage is concomitant with your ability to let go of your fears and your inhibitions and let it happen. And as soon as you do, and when people look at possession, they mainly think about that one stage of mounting, of the violent and the a lot of times you'll see self-violence, where people are lashing at themselves and whatever. But the more interesting part to me is when that stops and the riding begins, because all of a sudden all that violence goes away. The person looks up at you and they're not themselves. Even their features have completely changed. Their voice has changed. Sometimes they're speaking a language that they absolutely have never known or heard before in their lives. So, and once again, that's as soon as you're able to kind of let yourself go and let yourself get into the process and let the spirit or the Loa take over, that's when in my opinion, the possession gets really interesting, because then you're not talking to a person, you're talking to a Loa or a spirit in a person's body. And then finally you have grounding, which there are a lot of different ways you can ground. But basically, once the possession's over, once you've learned what you had to learn or celebrated what you're celebrating, that it's time for the spirit to leave, with the Loa to leave, and there are a lot of different rituals you can do for grounding. Most commonly is to have an exorcism. That you have and when I say exorcism, obviously that does go back to the whole Catholic idea of this battle with the spirit. In Vodou, it's not so much a battle at all. It's more or less thanking the spirit for coming and letting it leave. And then the grounding could last up to 3 days after that, as far as relaxing, getting back into being who you are or were before the possession. And then 6, and this is possibly because it's not something that is always going to happen, but you have what's called perfect possession, which is at some point you can make the decision whether or not you want to come back to being who you were before. That you can go into an alignment with the Loa that possesses you and say, I want you to live in my body and live through me for the rest of my life. And so in that way, you get to be, you're basically co-inhabiting the same body as the Loa is in. And so it's a balance between between having control of yourself and giving up control of yourself, and letting this other being live through you and teach through you. And that's a big part of why you would do that, is the amount that you're able to learn and experience is far beyond what you would be able to if it's just yourself. And this is known, I mean, in Vodou pretty clearly, that there's a point, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, that you'll actually make that decision or decide not to make that decision, but it's pretty routine. In the Catholic idea of exorcism and possession, that's the sign of somebody who is basically given themselves over to the devil 100%. That they have signed a pact or whatever to completely become perfectly possessed. And obviously in Catholicism, then you're damned to hell and all that other stuff. In Vodou, you're just enlightened much more than you'll be able to be for the rest of your life. So it's a really interesting kind of difference in the cultural values of possession. But possession is a huge part of the most ancient religions. That every religion that came before Islam, Judaism, and Christianity practiced that as a staple. Now, so how do you call the spirits down, or the Loa? The first part is through their veves. Oh, yes.
Question. So these Loa, they really want a body in a way. So they're like kind of almost waiting for us to invite them in so they can come in and take over.
Not necessarily. The way that it works, they're perfectly happy to take over a body, and some are really enthusiastic for it because that lets them do things that as a spirit you can't do, which, you drink, have sex, do these crazy things that we love to do in our everyday lives. And so that gives them the chance to do that. But, yeah.
Something you said earlier, just because they possess a certain body does not mean that they can't be doing what they generally do. That's just a part of them. He did say earlier that they can possess one body at a time.
Yeah, definitely.
It's going to be part of them possessing you. They're still going to be able to do what they normally do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess my idea was like, what is it in, what's in for the Loa? Like, why they continue to come and possess bodies? Like, what did the Loa get out of that situation that benefits them if they don't do it?
A good deal. Yeah, a good deal of why the Loa do a lot of what they do is because they weren't only given guardianship over this planet, but over specifically the human race, and as such, they see themselves as being teachers, and it's one of those things where if you've got a kid that's just absolutely not learning what you want it to learn, you can grab its hands and be like, no, here's how you swing the bat, and the Loa are kind of at that where they're like, you just keep messing this up. Boom, they'll snap in and be able to they'll actually take control of your body to the point where, like, no, these are the motions that you need to make. These are the words that you need to say. Here's the state that you need to get into. And so that's kind of like their aggressive teaching style is through possession. And so, yeah, that's really what they get out of it, is to fulfill their purpose as teachers and guides. But there are also other specific Loa. What's that? Yeah, right. Well, yeah, you do have those that are definitely, and they're of a lesser, I guess, a lesser order of Loa that'll jump in just to go have fun. So
Would you say that they, in a way, they care about us? Do they want to teach us, or
most of them do immensely care for the people they teach. Yeah, very, very much so. But then you do have the idea that when everybody's born, like that Zatwa, the Star of Destiny, that we all have a Loa that is specific to us, and in the Christian idea that would be like a holy guardian angel, and that Loa will follow us and guide us. And when we get to the point in Haitian Vodou where we're going to make the decision of whether or not to invite a Loa into us for the rest of our lives, it's going to be that one specific Loa, and it's very specific for everybody. And so that spirit or that Loa really specifically wants to try to get you to the point where you're going to accept that, because that's its purpose, is to merge with you and to teach you on the highest ability that it's going to be able to. That, I mean, oh, to become the Loa, or to become possessed by the Loa permanently? I think so, and I think that yeah. Mm-hmm. And you've got that in, once again, before Christianity, Islam, and Judaism came on the scene massively, all religions were basically centered around shamanism. And that's the shamanic practice, is to drop ego, drop your self-identity, and let the spirit, whether that's one spirit or just the spirit in general, come into you and flow through you. As well as with a lot of Christian religions as well, to not act out of ego, but to act out of what the spirit flows through you. And it's similar vocabulary, just kind of a different viewpoint. Yeah. So yeah. But the way you're going to call down Loa is through first their veve. That they all have very specific signs and symbols that are attributed to each spirit or Loa. This was actually borrowed, the whole idea of a veve was actually borrowed from that French occultism. That's not something that existed in Africa. Or if it did, it played an extremely minor role. There were more songs and intonations and dances that were associated with each Loa that would bring that possession on. And basically the French occultists, the European occultists, have found that this can be a really quick way to get the same effect. That rather than getting into this elaborate ceremony and dance, that you could draw this veve and visually and with your other senses activate it, and that will call the Loa down just as effectively. But that's not originally from Africa. That was brought over from the French. And there's another image of that, and this is how elaborate these can get. You can see the chairs there, so you have an idea of the scale. But this is a whole operation of actually various veve that are laid out there, and a good deal of it is you're going to start out by drawing it, and just simply drawing the veve, you'll usually use flour or cornmeal, gets you into the state of resonance with that specific Loa. And then you go over it with different songs. You'll use rum that you'll sprinkle around the veves, and you'll notice, just like you pointed out, that it's possessing both the area and yourself at the same time. That as the area is getting filled with the spirit, you're getting filled with the Loa. So that's really the first way that you're going to call down spirits, is through that. I believe that is Erzuli. Yeah. We've got some other things like that's not Erzuli's. I think that's Chongo is the Santeria version, but yeah.
So what would is that a Christ on a cross?
Yeah.
So what would be the purpose of
Well, that's part of the syncretism. I don't know if you guys came in after I talked about that a bit. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. But basically, when the slave trade was bringing people from Africa over here, that they start their religion, the African religion, started to merge with the religion indigenous to the area, or brought into the area by their slave owners, being Catholicism. And so they started noticing that, and you'll see this with just about every religion, that there are attributes that are basically the same that are being put in different languages. So they're like, oh, St. Peter is just like Legba. So we can worship Legba by calling it St. Peter. And then nobody, tries to kill us for doing so. So. No, you do. Yeah, you've got different. It looks like we've got a representation of quite a few different religions there. Well, and once again, I mean, yeah, that's not me. That's Google. Google did this. But once again, where the entire biological beginnings of the human race came from Africa, it's not surprising that we see that this perfectly. That syncretism's not so hard to do. That there's so many similarities because they all came from a common root, and so yeah, you can easily, and I'll look at this as I was studying Vodou. Well, not only is it so identical with Catholicism, but also with Hinduism. Oh my God, Islam is really close to it too, and you can find just about everything. And and make a matchup with it, which is interesting because you can't necessarily do that with Hinduism and Christianity put together. You can do that really easily if you have a kind of that missing link, which I think is from Africa. Yeah. I think because the same reason why rum. I always ask that. I don't. Yeah, I don't care for rum. I would use Courvoisier any day before rum. But the issue with that is they're using the materials that they had at hand, and cornmeal. Not so much flour, but cornmeal is something they had on hand pretty abundantly, as well as rum. I mean, Haiti is still a pretty big rum import or export hub. So yeah, it's basically that they had it on hand and that you can use it to shape the different symbols that you want to shape it into. Yeah. I mean, you could. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could draw these lines in cocaine and have the same effect. So, but right, yeah, exactly. That would bring all the low out. But yeah, you can use basically any substance. It's not that cornmeal or flour are especially sacred. However, there is the idea that there's a matrix of consciousness. And once that matrix of consciousness is imbued with a certain idea for long enough, it solidifies. So in that way, rum was used because it was available. It got used so much that now the Loa prefer it. That you call them up and they're like, "What are you doing with whiskey here? I want rum." So it is something that gets basically embedded into that group consciousness, or it becomes basically a meme. But it's a meme that transcends the immediate local consciousness and more expands through time. Now, I said earlier, and you can't see a good deal of this, it's a little blurry, and that's probably a good thing. Animal sacrifice is an integral part of Haitian Vodou, of the African Zulu religions, and really of a good deal of religions. That you notice that they all start or have animal sacrifice and blood sacrifice as an integral part of their faith. I mean, we even see that with the sacrament, the blood and flesh of Christ. Same idea, only it's a much more literal because that hasn't been taken out of play there really as much as it has in our civilized religions. But once again, it's not necessarily just about that you're killing an animal, and there's going to be a huge difference between a religious animal sacrifice and some deranged kid killing a cat in the woods. Two completely different ideas with the approach of it, and also with what's done. The animals in sacrifice in an actual religious setting are always eaten by the group. They are possessed by the Loa that's going to be worked with, so you're actually eating the flesh of the animal, and in the process eating the spirit of the Loa. And the animal is going to feed usually the entire congregation that's there. And aside from animal sacrifice, there are a lot of offerings that are going to be made to the Loa. Like I said, rum is one of them, where you'll sprinkle rum around the veves and on the altars, and you'll also leave food items there. And I think this really comes from the thought or the idea that the Loa aren't so different from us, that they need food, they need sustenance, and they like to have fun and drink and whatever. And this is the same thing in a lot of Scandinavian religions, that you would leave like porridge out on your doorstep for the spirits of your ancestors to come and feast upon. And it's like, well, I think we know that they're not really eating the food, but there's something symbolic there that we're giving of our resources for them. And it's just like any sacrifice that we're giving something that we could easily use ourselves, but we're offering it to them, and usually to the point where if you've got food on the altar, you're not going to eat it for the most part. It's going to decay there. And in a culture like Haiti has always been in, extremely impoverished, letting food sit out and rot isn't something you're going to do lightly. I want to get into the specifics of how to actually do these rituals, so you guys can go home and get possessed as soon as you want to. You know, we might want to throw that out. I think Adam can do some. Casey, I don't think would be too bad at it. Yeah, and I'm actually putting together a course on evocation, which once again is basically summoning up spirits to visible appearance. And part of that course is that you're absolutely required to learn and master exorcism, because when you're bringing yourself into that close a contact with spirits on a constant basis, possessions are just going to happen. And so it's one of those things of you need to know how to act when it does. So that that course is going to be out, and that'll teach you exorcism. Or if you want to hook up with Adam or myself, if you want to experiment with this, I'm sure both of us would be game to jump into a ritual and help you out with it. Yeah, that's true. That's yeah. So if you're in this area, then you can easily go check that out. The Southern Utah Pagan Alliance is great because it's not like it's not a group that's like, oh, we're only going to practice this type of magic or believe this certain thing, but it's just a collection of people that have come together and say, hey, let's share our experiences. So it's a good resource. So. Yeah, excellent. So you can get with Adam if you want to start kind of experimenting or experiencing any of this, and myself, and we'll definitely want to proceed with safety. Like I said, the big thing with this is that it works, and it can work and be an excellent thing for you, or it can work and really destroy a lot of your life. That's one of the things that's interesting that I've seen is that when people start playing with the occult, they'll start doing candle magic or whatever, and it's all fun until it starts working, and then they run for the hills because they weren't really expecting that. But it does work, and that's a startling thing to some people, and to other people that's what they're going for. So yeah. But I want to get into the specifics of how to do the different rites, and so this is the Rada rite, which once again the Rada are going to be the more beneficial of the spirits of the Loa. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to draw veves, and you'll have often multiple veves, and you're always going to start out with legbas. So you're going to draw legbas veve, and then you're going to draw whatever other veves that you're going to have. You're always going to start with legba though, and then a sacrifice to legba. And in simple rituals, that sacrifice will just be the sprinkling of rum. In more advanced rituals where you've got a lot of people, more ceremonial practice, you're going to sacrifice an animal that you'll eat. This has gotten to be a really big matter of contention in the United States where until recently animal sacrifice was prohibited by law. It's now been upheld by the Supreme Court. There was a church in Florida that was able to fight it successfully, and they were able to say, okay, for religious purposes, so long as there's not animal abuse going on, that animal sacrifice is allowed. And I don't remember that actual case, but it's pretty easy to look up because it's the only time that anybody's successfully challenged that. And what's that? That was in 95 or 90. So yeah, pretty recent. But yeah, so you're going to make a sacrifice to Legba, whether that's an animal sacrifice or just a sacrifice of rum, sacrifice of different incenses or other offerings that you're going to make, and then libations. So basically, you're taking the rum or the usually it's going to be rum, whatever the alcoholic substance that you're using that the spirit is possessing. You're going to take that, and everyone's basically going to pass that around and partake of that. Oh, okay. All right. But what you're doing is, once again, since the spirit of the Loa dwells within that substance, when you take it into your body, you're taking the spirit of that Loa into your body. Yeah. Usually you're going to you're going to leave it on your altar if you have an altar set up, and I'm going to get into how to set up your altar in a bit. But you're going to leave it on your altar. You're going to call the specific loa that you're working with down into the altar and into that rum for a period of time. And that'll vary depending on the specific loa and what you're going to be doing. But you can also go buy a fresh bottle of rum, and as soon as you start doing these other parts of the ritual, the area is going to become possessed. Therefore, all objects in the area is going to be possessed, including the rum. So, right, exactly. Now, the rum that's used, like altar rum or ceremonial rum, is it's potent in a very different way than alcohol is usually potent. Where when you drink it, you can definitely sense that there's something else in there. There's some other substance that you're partaking of, and it hasn't necessarily been spiked. It's just possessed, and so you'll feel that possession hit pretty quick. And then the calling down of the loa, which can be done with and often is with ecstatic drumming, dance, and movement. Now, man is is a specific type of drums that are used, which there are 3 drums that vary in size. That you'll have a small one, a larger one, and then an even larger one. The largest man stands probably about that high, and so you've got to have like a stool or a seat that you're sitting on to play it. And interestingly, this has always been known to represent the sun. But until recently, it never really made sense. Why do you have 3 of them of different sizes to resemble the sun? Until we were able to start looking more closely at the sun and realizing there are actually 3 levels of it. There's the chromosphere, and I can't remember the other 2. But basically, you've got the nucleus, kind of a middle area, and then the area that actually is colored, the chromosphere on the outside, and there's an alignment there that there was a knowledge of, just like we see in a lot of shamanic practices, like the Mayans. There's a knowledge of something that's happening cosmologically that technology is just barely starting to catch up with. I'm going to say ecstatic drumming. You're basically not going to be drumming from what's in your head, but you're going to be drumming with what comes through you from the possession. So it's not you that's beating the drums at all. It's the loa that's beating them through you with your body. And that'll produce some really interesting beats and rhythms. And then the dance is going to be the same, where rather than having a controlled dance, and this is really hard for your average Westerner to do, is the dances aren't really memorized. It's not a matter of knowing what steps you're doing. It's letting the spirit completely take you over and move your body however it wants. And so that'll be a really interesting experience, and it really is, once again, comes back to dropping your ego identity and just letting yourself go with the spirit. And that's really when possession moves into its full form. Is you'll start the dance pretty kind of just placidly, whatever, and then when it completely takes you, you are absolutely just writhing around and going about like a madman. Now, what will happen is that at some certain point, and this will be done sometimes by a group of people all dancing in this way, that all of them will collapse. They'll just fall to the floor, and then when they get up, they're not them anymore. It's something else that's inside of them that's going to start speaking through them. And that's when the communication and communion with the loa will happen, is that the loa will be able to speak through you, give their whatever dictations they're going to give to the group, and then the group can also come up and say, hey, you know what, here's what I want out of this, and that's where requests are given, that often in a written form. Yeah.
Do you lose consciousness while you are fully possessed? Consciousness?
For the most part, if you are completely 100% possessed, you're not going to remember it. You're going to have amnesia. That's one of the significators when you're talking to people who say they've been possessed. Well, what was it like? If they can tell you what it was like at all, it wasn't a full possession. It was more of a partial possession. There was still some of you left.
The perfect possession, you could say that it was a combination of you and the loa.
Right, and that's why, and I'm kind of distinguishing between a long-term possession and almost like an equal cohabitation type of possession, where you can still be possessed and have that spirit in you, and be able to have a bit of control over yourself. But then there's a point, and specifically when there's intense communication with the Loa, that while the Loa is speaking through you, that's not something that you're going to remember. Hardly anybody who actually has a Loa speak through them can tell them what the Loa said. They can't report on that later.
So you want people that are not actually part of the ritual to be there, so they can actually know what's being said?
There are going to be varying stages of possession for just about everybody. Some people are going to be in light possession, and then you'll have some Hungan there who's always going to be completely grounded and not possessed at all. That they're basically going to shield themselves from it. So if they need to step in for an exorcism, they can do that. Oh, Hungan, yeah, sorry. Hungan is the easy translation is a priest, but it also serves a practical function as well, where it'll be a medicine man, a healer, a sorcerer, basically for any spiritual function that anybody could ever serve in a society or culture, the Hungan serves. And so if you need, excuse me, if you need spell work done, you go to the Hungan. If you feel like you need to be absolved from some sort of wrongdoing, you go to the Hungan. So exorcisms, you would go to him. So the Hungan has been trained usually for several years in all of these spiritual arts, so he can basically jump into any of these situations and handle them expertly.
Okay. So is this enlightenment, is it more like a subconscious enlightenment, so you don't necessarily remember things you learn, but is it like a subconscious thing that
You'll
how is that enlightenment brought? It's amnesia.
The experience is going to kind of trickle into your consciousness, usually over the space of sometimes days or weeks. A lot of times, if you go into a full possession where you lose consciousness, it'll start to trickle out through your dreams. And not that you're going to have necessarily dreams of whatever was going on, but you're going to wake up from sleep, and instantly upon waking up, you're going to be struck with realizations about your existence, your place in existence, about the spiritual arts as a whole, and go, oh, I don't know where that came from, but it always will follow that possession. So, I don't understand the question.
Well, if you're going into one of these rites looking for specific meaning,
Right.
these things start coming to you over the next few days or weeks.
Mm-hmm.
As you need it.
Yeah, as you need it and as you're able to handle it, because I know that's a big part of it. Is it's one of the things. If we could look into the mind of God, it would just obliterate our brain. So it's trickling what you're able to handle and what you need in your own experience for sure. And mind you also, where if you've got the cohabitation with the spirit, you're able to basically say, okay, I give you, permission to use my arms to show me these movements that I'm going to do with my arms and hands, and then you can actually witness your arms doing these movements. Okay, I give you permission to use my mouth, and then you start speaking, but you still have the cognitive faculties to even make notes of what's going on. So, with full possession, with 100%, where you're wiped out and the Loa is speaking through you, obviously you're not going to have the ability to do that. But that's usually going to be in a group setting, anyways. If you're in with yourself, if you've gotten to that point of comfort with the Loa that you can be possessed without a Hungan there to exercise you, then you can really start to experience a lot of that symbiosis with the Loa. Now, it's almost always going to end, if you have a large ritual where there has been blood sacrifice, with a celebration and a feast. So basically, all of this goes on. You basically get to the point where you've given the Loa whatever request. The Loa is communicated with the group, and then it turns into a huge celebration, a feasting on the sacrifice. And usually the animal will be sacrificed at the beginning of the ritual. But and then there's a group of people in a large celebrations that are going to take that animal, go start preparing it while everything else is going on. So by the time you get to this point, dinner's ready. So in Haiti, where you've got these elaborate celebrations, it's pretty systematic. So yeah, and you've got exorcism and grounding, and whether you're doing this with a small group or with a large group, you're always going to do that, where everybody that's involved in it is going to go through an exorcism and grounding stage, where the Hungans who are keeping themselves separate from the possession are able to go around and start bringing everybody back down to their normal states of consciousness. Anything on the Rada rite before I move on? And now the Petro rite. Yeah.
The different rites, I mean, what would you do? What are some examples that you would use the Rada rite?
Okay, that's great. Yeah, you would use the Rada rite a lot of times to teach you to learn from the Loa themselves, and from the benevolent and teaching Loa, that you would call on them for learning, and then for a lot of everyday concerns. So like, let's say if you've got a large group there, that people would come up and they'd be like, my marriage is going terribly, can you please help me with that? And then the Loa may or may not do something to help you with that. Well, whatever your everyday concerns are, that those will be addressed in that ritual. Whereas the Petro rite, where these are more aggressive, more violent spirits, they're, in Western terms, it would be really easy to call them demons. They're more of an active principle, and an extremely aggressive active principle. And most people that you'll come across doing group celebrations, for the most part, especially in parts of Haiti, in the more populated parts of Haiti, are going to be the Rada rite. The Petro rite is more along the lines of black magic. Every Hungan who's really worth his salt is going to use both, but he's not going to do the Petro rite or work with the Petro in public view. It's almost one of those things that's your own seeking after power, and I guess that's a big part of it. Is the difference is that when you're working with the Rada, you're almost forfeiting your own control over things to the Loa, whereas in the Petro rite, you're almost doing the opposite, where you're saying you have all this power and I want it, and so it's almost an opposite type of thing. And I actually see the value in both and the detriment in both. Obviously, being completely power hungry will end in being completely destructive. But we also notice in a lot of these places, there's such a degree of poverty, and the quality of life is so low. And I think a good part of that is because there's too much reliance on that. It's a sense of fatalism that, well, it's up to the Loa whether I succeed or fail. It's up to the Loa whether my marriage goes well, whether my crops grow, and all of this. And so they basically just completely give away all of their ability to govern their own lives. So there is a detriment to that as well, obviously. Does that answer that? Excellent. So then we've got the Petro rite, which once again is going to be performed in secret. It is considered to be the opening of the back doors. So you've got the front doors that regular Loa are going to use. You've got the and that's kind of a mysterious saying, the opening the back doors. But there are a lot of rituals that just aren't done in public in Haiti and also in the Congo that when you're doing it in these secret rituals, that it actually opens up quite a bit of power to you. Rather than calling on Legba, often you'll begin by calling on Metcalfu, which is almost thought to be the opposite entity of Legba. That if Legba is the good, benevolent, wise old teacher, Kalfu's a power-mad, blind god. You could almost see it like that, where it's he is the epitome of untempered power. And now you'll still have sacrifice, but rather than sacrificing, a lot of times you'll sacrifice in a Rada ritual the same things: a goat, black or any kind of hen in the Rada rite. And there's the inclusion of a pig, and that's not really done a whole lot in the Rada version of Vodou. The pigs are basically not part of that, and I'm not sure exactly where that started or how that came about, but we noticed that with a lot of What's that? And that's what, you notice that with a lot of older religions that the pig is just kind of an untouchable meat. But they also will use with their drums, rather than making them out of cowhide, they'll make them out of pig hide, and that kind of gives it more of a sinister quality in their view. And then they'll also get into human sacrifice in the Petro rite. And it's one of those things that's not really talked about, but it's known about. And if you go into Haiti looking for people to do this Petro rite with, or looking for the Petro Bokors that'll help you with that, Bokor would be basically like a black magician, you're probably going to be their next sacrifice. It's a really extraordinarily secret thing, but human sacrifice can be a part of it. Same thing with the ecstatic dance and movements. That doesn't really change a whole lot, besides the fact that you're going to see these dances are a bit more violent, and often they do lead to orgy and to basically a complete overwhelming of the individuals by the essence that they're calling in. You'll have mass possession, where in the Rada rite, usually you're going to have one person who assumes the majority of the possession, and then whatever the major loa that's going to be called will speak through that person to the crowd. In the Petro rite, you'll have more mass possessions where there's not one leader, and I mean, isn't that the case for what we think of when we think of power gone absolutely wild? Is that it's like in anarchy, who's going to lead an anarchist movement? It's basically, this is spiritual anarchy. And so everybody is going to become massively possessed. Often in these rituals, there won't be a hungan that makes sure that it's going safe. That everybody's going to just dive in and get lost in the power and the ecstasy of the entire thing. There's also an emphasis on the demonstration of powers. That when people start getting possessed, they'll start doing things that humans just can't do. One example is if you're possessed by, for the life of me, I can't remember his name. Basically, the Loa who basically is Martian and rules over kind of the warrior type of personality. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. But they'll take swords, heat them in the fires, and then stab themselves through and pull it out, and be just fine. They'll do these things that defy physics and biology entirely. Cutting off of limbs. If they're different ones will report levitation and that sort of thing. Obviously, this is extremely hard to document, but these are the stories that are definitely told about what happens in a Rada rite. Was that? Okay. Petro, thank you. Sorry, thank you. And like I said, it can and does sometimes lead to a possible full-on sexual orgy. Exorcism may or may not come into play. Once again, it may just be one of those things that it goes until nobody's bodies can handle it anymore, and sometimes these will go for several days. And then until everybody just passes out, sleeps in the ritual area, and wakes up and kind of goes, what the hell just happened? So yeah, any questions on the Petro rite?
Well, you said that they stab themselves and chop limbs off, so they just once the sleeping comes, they'll wake up without an arm?
Well, sometimes, yeah, sometimes they will. I mean, and also, yeah, exactly. Like, dude, where's my hand? Yeah. So, yeah, and that can be the case. I mean, some of these that if I were to watch a video of some of the things that I remember from Petro rites, I mean, it's pretty intense. It's just the memories that come in flashes, and you're going, God, did that really happen? If that were caught on video, I mean, it would be absolutely unbelievable. Just the chaos that's really just being wreaked in this type of ritual. But yeah, people will wake up with limbs missing, and what happened there? Yeah, wow. But that would actually be, if that happened in one of these rituals, that would be a social or a cultural sign of your power and closeness with the specifically the Petro Loa. And so if you've got an eye or a hand missing, and it's kind of known culturally that that's where it happened, people just don't mess with you because you're pretty badass to cut off your own hand while possessed. So, yeah. Any other questions on the Petro rite?
What kind of like place would this happen? Because obviously this is kind of crazy situation. So you wouldn't do this in someone's like basement or something. Like you probably want to do this in the woods.
Casey has a nice backyard area. No, in Haiti, this will happen out in the forest areas, and it's one of those things that if you wander into, I mean, that sucks to be you. Haiti is a great place for this kind of stuff, and same thing with where it comes to different rituals where you're going to be digging up corpses and that sort of thing. I mean, human sacrifice. The entire government of Haiti is controlled by the Vodou cults. I mean, I know that for a fact, and I know that a lot of the issues that have gone on in Haiti has to do with the revolving of these cults. And so Haiti, if you're doing this kind of things, if police happen upon a human sacrifice, they're not even going to bother trying to try you for murder because they know that something bigger is going on in there. Whereas St. George, Utah, this is probably not going to be so much the case. So yeah, this is something, and this performed in secret, in very, very, very much in secret. I mean, you can go out into the desert here and do some pretty crazy rituals, and if people wander upon it, they're like, "Oh, you're a nutcase," and that's fine. But anything of this magnitude, you're going to call the wrath of the entire police force of the state down on you. So yeah, so this is something that you're going to do in extreme secrecy, and it happens in such secrecy that a lot of times most people who live in places like Port-au-Prince, the big port cities in Haiti, deny that these kinds of rituals even happen. But they do, and I mean they do happen. It's just nobody ever sees them happen, and those who do don't really ever talk about it. Now, just like in most religions, there are different stages of initiation. Vodou is obviously no different, and in fact is pretty intense with their stages of initiation. A lot of times these will follow rites of passage as well, and signifies different abilities that you're able to have as far as what you're able to do societally and culturally. If you just barely get into the current, you can't start doing spell work or ritual work for people or doing exorcisms. You just don't have that under your belt. And so these are really intertwined with the cultural rites of passage as well. That entering the current, and it's called a current just as moving water. That water has always been a massive symbol for the spiritual. We've got baptism that shows that. Just about every religion has something that deals with water, and even the movement of water basically signifies the active spiritual force. So entering the current is when you first come into it. You're going to be initiated by whatever Hungan kind of puts you into it and starts teaching you. You're going to do a house initiation, which basically you're going to have specific houses or groups, kind of like you can call it a coven or a congregation. Specific small groups that get together and teach each other and do their ritual work and ceremonies together would be called a house. So you go in for a house initiation. They basically say, okay, well, you're in the current. You're going to be in our house. You're going to be under the papa of the house. And a lot of what you're going to be doing while you're kind of in that stage is mundane tasks: sweeping the temple out, setting things up, making sure that people who come in are cared for. Really kind of basic stuff. And then you're going to get into the Vodou initiation, which is where you actually start learning how to do the rituals and ceremonies and practices. And then the cult initiation. After you start learning the practices, you're going to start discovering that there are various cults, and for some reason the word cult is used more than order or lodge or temple in Vodou. It's specifically called cults. that you're going to find there are cults of specific Loa, so cults that worship Loa, cults that worship Kalfu, and that's not going to necessarily conflict with your house initiation. If the house that you belong to worships one thing and you start moving more and more towards something else, it's not necessarily going to conflict. It can if they diverge too much. But then you can be initiated into different cults along the way, and that's a pretty deep initiation where you start getting into the secrets of kind of the inner secrets of that tradition. And then if you go on this long enough and you dedicate yourself to it, you can become a Hungan or a Mambo. You know, I talked about a Hungan being basically one who fulfills any spiritual niche that a person can fulfill in a society. A Mambo is a female that does that. Interestingly, in Vodou, the Hungan, the male sorcerer priest, has to work really, really hard on getting that position. It's basically just understood. If you're a woman and you're in Vodou, you're at the top level. That women kind of get a free pass because they hold more of the sensitivity to the spiritual and a connection to everything that's spiritual. And that's really the thought, is that women and it's kind of known that women are of the highest order of spiritual existence, really. And then you can become a Grand Hungan or a Grand Mambo, obviously grand, large, important Hungan or Mambo. And that's basically, if you're a Hungan or a Mambo, you can initiate others, you can start your own house, that sort of thing. Grand Hungan or Mambo is basically an elevated status of that. You can do everything that any of the above can do, and it's just a bit more respect and a bit more knowledge and power that's given to you. Now, you can also become a King Hungan or a Queen Mambo, and you can only get that after you're 50 years old, and you have to go through extremely specific things. You have to travel to the motherland of Dahomey, back to Africa, to the Congo. You have to learn how to completely master the Loa. So rather than just calling them and letting them speak through you, you learn how to actually command them. And so that's like the highest elevation of that a human can ever reach, is to become a King Hungan or a Queen Mambo. The woman who came over, and I'll talk about her in just a bit, to Louisiana and set this up as voodoo. She basically took this whole religion and started calling it voodoo, and just basically used some of the spells and kind of the trinkets of it without really taking the essence of the religion. Called herself a voodoo queen, and she was not. And anybody who is from Haiti is very clear that she is not a Vodou queen. Now, one of the important things, and you'll get, this is lava tête, washing of the head. That you'll usually do this around the time of the house initiation and the Vodou initiation. That this is like a, I guess you could compare it to a baptism, where you're opening your, you're actually using water, using the washing of the physical washing of the head, to open up the head to receive either information or possession. That it's the spirit that I compared earlier to being your holy guardian angel is actually called a met tet, which is master of the head. And if you back up a bit here. Yeah. Do people need a quick break? Do you guys want to take a break? I'm kind of going a bit long. All right, let's take a break for, what do you say, 5 minutes? All right. Okay, so we were just talking about the lava tête, the washing of the head, and now I should tell you at this point that that it's thought that the Tibananga, the part of yourself, your samsaric consciousness, your ego identification, exists inside your head, and that would fit with, that's where our brain's at. That's where all of the processes of going, this is who I am, really come from. Now, when you do the washing of the head, the lava tête, you're opening yourself, you're opening your head up to both let go of that ego identification as well as bring other things in. part of what you're going to do in a lave tete when the Hungan or the Mambo starts this process is they're going to get in deep contact with your met tet, the master of your head, that holy guardian angel figure. And as they do that, they'll be able to tell you information about that met tet, or you're going to start intuitively getting more and more awareness of what that is, or who that is, and how to get in contact with it. Now, once you do, that's when you start approaching the question of whether or not you're going to go forward and become possessed by that fully and permanently. If you do, what's necessary is in order to do that, is to actually remove the Tibananga, that part of yourself, your ego identification, your samsara consciousness, remove it, pull it out of the head, and put it in a pot de tete. This is a pot of the head. And so you're basically taking a portion of your soul and trapping it in this pot. And then you're calling in the Mettet to fill that space. And so who you were before you went through this is completely gone, is trapped in a vessel, and instead you have a Mettet, a Loa, residing therein. The pot de tete is placed on the altar as an ultimate sacrifice, that you've sacrificed not just an animal or the soul or life of another thing, but you've actually sacrificed your soul, your identity, to the process of spiritual realization. And that is when it gets into perfect possession, when you're no longer yourself, you don't identify yourself as being yourself, you identify yourself by the name and attributes of that Loa. Are any questions about that? Yeah, it's a pretty intense thing, and I kind of just glossed over it, but. Oh, that's a good question. Do you ever go by that name? No, that's a name. The name of your Mettet, once you receive it, you never communicate to another person. It's known throughout basically all of occultism and spirituality that these secret names that you get are never to be revealed, and that by knowing the name of any spirit or any person, that you can control that person. Now, knowing your legal name isn't necessarily the issue, but knowing your spiritual name, or the name that resonates with your highest self, does give people the ability to manipulate that through different rituals. So there's also something that happens in more of the Petro side of things, where you can take somebody else's Tibananga out of their body without their will, put it in a vessel, and then put something else in them. It's really hard to do. Most of the time it's going to involve having to actually physically abduct that person to do this, but it can be done, and it is done from time to time. So, and another part of that is you notice in some of these religions and spiritual systems that you'll have the whole shrunken head thing, where they're able to take a head and shrink it, and then you'll have some folks that wear that on a necklace or along their belts, and that's not just heads. That they actually are wearing human souls in those heads. That they actually do rituals to trap that part of the person's soul in that head, shrink them so they're a wearable size, and then they're carrying around with them the souls of other people. And that's a pretty extreme form of black magic. Why you would do that would basically be so you can use those souls as almost like batteries for your rituals and your own magic. Any other questions? All right, so like I said, that's going to be placed on the altar. I don't know that I necessarily see one right away on this altar, but it's kind of hard to see. There's a lot going on there. But as you get more in tune with the Loa, as they speak more to you, and specifically with your Mettet, your altar is going to start to evolve, where it'll start out with just a table with a cloth over it, and then you're going to start going, well, it really needs some rum there because I use rum a lot, and your Loa is going to say, I really like to have to be associated with this saint, and so you put pictures of that saint on there. They'll give you different sigils, veves. They'll basically just start guiding you in developing an altar. And what the altar really represents, not only does it represent the spiritual universe as a whole, but it also represents yourself. Once you've had that perfect possession of your met tet, that this is going to represent the merger between yourself and the met tet. And in my personal altar, Vodou altar that I use, I actually have a mirror hung there that while I'm sitting at the altar, I can see myself, and that's a perfect reflection of the Loa that inhabits me, since my own ritual of lava tet and pot de tete. So the altar is you're never going to find two altars that look alike if they're actually authentic. Any questions on the altar? And the altar once again is going to be usually made out of wood. It's obviously known that wood is a living material, and therefore it has a spirit in it. And then when you set it up, you're going to possess that altar with the spirit or the Loa that you're going to start working with. This altar is specifically geared towards the Gedes. You can tell that by the black and the purple are the colors of the Gedes of death. And then up here we've got a pretty clear Veve of Samedi, the Lord of the Dead. And there's a chair set up here with a hat and some it looks like some black clothing that's commonly worn by people who are possessed by Baron Samedi. That they'll get possessed, they'll want to wear that, they'll smoke cigars, and there's a lot of really specific behaviors and characteristics that people who are possessed by various Loa show, and that's pretty demonstrable as you look at that. Any questions on the altar? Now, I mentioned earlier about Vodou cults, and immediately the word cult turns a lot of people off because we think of the doomsday cults and such. But cults can in Haiti can basically be considered to be like temples or lodges, very specific, specifically oriented groups that work with very specific Loa and very specific rituals. One is the cult of the sun, or the cult of Libra is what it's more often called. That's usually the first cult that most people are going to come in contact with and be initiated into, because Legba is the initiator into all of the secrets, and so on your own quest you're going to be initiated into that usually. You have the cult of the spider, cult of the green butterfly, coffin walkers, and those are some pretty common cults in Haiti. Cult of the spider and green butterfly, I can't say a whole lot about. Cult of the coffin walkers, basically they're a Gede cult that part of their rituals do involve walking across coffins that hold human bodies, and that's basically just basically walking into the realm of death while at the same time not falling into death itself. If the Brotherhood of the Goat is another. And there's basically for every major Loa, there's going to be a cult out there, and then for Loa that nobody's ever heard of, there'll be a cult out there. And you can never go if you go into Haiti. Once again, if you go there and you start asking, how can I find the coffin walkers? You're not going to last very long in Haiti. That these cults are extremely secret, and they're not going to. You can't contact them. If you're ready for them, they contact you, and that's I've seen that be the case more often than not. That for all of this, once you've kind of put yourself into alignment with all of this, wherever you're wanting or needing to go, appears in your life pretty strangely. That it'll come up, it'll show up. That you'll have somebody actually give you a phone call and say, "Hey, you've never heard from me before, but I have an invitation to extend to you." Or that you'll casually run into somebody who's a member of one of these cults and will invite you in. You can also be invited into these cults by the Loa that are worshipped in them. That Legba can come to you and say, "Are you ready to be initiated into the cult of the sun?" You undergo that initiation. When anybody else in that cult sees you, comes across you, they can know that the Loa that they're in communication with will basically let them know that you're a brother. And they're not mutually exclusive, meaning that if I join the cult of the sun, that doesn't mean that I can't join any of these others. That they all really kind of work together pretty well. However, there gets to be a bit of a power play, and we can see a lot of things that happen in Haiti, in the Dominican Republic, and in Africa, that we'll see wars, we'll see tribal issues, that those are physical representations of these wars, these power struggles that are going on between the various cults. And you can actually, if you know enough about them, you can actually signify and go, oh, okay, the cult of the coffin walkers is actually in control at this point. And you'll see that rotation. Any questions on cults? Now, this is the part of voodoo that most people readily associate with it, which are Grigri, Mojo, and Conjure, which basically are the rituals and the spells to actually affect change in the world. Once again, all of this occurs through possession. That the items that you're using become possessed by the Loa that are associated with those items and associated with the task that you're trying to achieve. Really, there's not much difference between Grigri and Mojo. They come from different cultures. I think Mojo is more along the lines of Jamaican, whereas Grigri is Haitian. But Mojo's heard a lot more and used a lot more than Grigri is. If you're in Haiti, Grigri is the appropriate name for it, though. You'll get a little bag together, a little satchel, or you can get a piece of parchment or skin, and put different items in it. You're going to use minerals, plants, bones, organs, and written commands. So if I wanted to do a ritual to control somebody's thoughts or to make somebody behave in a certain way, I would get usually probably a purple or a black bag and put a small photograph of that person in that bag, written on the photograph exactly what change I want to have made. Then I would get certain minerals. Lapis lazuli would be a great one to have for a ritual like that. Different plants. Damiana would be good for that. Black cohosh would be good for that. And bones of different animals. Usually bird bones will be used quite a bit. Vertebrae, finger bones are pretty potent. Different organs from animals. So you'll take small organs. You'll take things like liver, kidneys, heart, tongue, eyeballs, sometimes eyelids. If you're going to use human parts, eyelids are thought to be pretty potent. And you're going to possess these usually one at a time. So you're going to take one specific element and say, okay, this is going to be possessed by this Loa to have this effect. And then you're going to take another, this is going to be possessed by this Loa to have this effect. Obviously, you need to research this quite a bit to make sure you're not throwing adversarial Loa into the same bag together. But then once you have it all put together, put it in the bag, you put that on your altar, and then you're going to possess the whole thing with one Loa that's going to usually preside over the entire operation. So in order to do something like this, and this is why it takes so much time, dedication, and discipline to get to the point of being a hungan, because you absolutely have to know what you're doing with what Loa. You have to be able to communicate with the Loa beforehand through divination to say, is this even going to be good? Are you guys going to get along enough to make this happen and whatever? Now, puppet magic is what most people know as being voodoo dolls. That it's a figure of a person that's stuffed with different elements. It's never going to be just cotton. It'll be different herbs that are put in there. It's hardly ever done in Haiti. You'll hardly ever see a voodoo doll. That's pretty much an invention of modern voodoo. Every now and again you'll see that, and it's almost always, if you see it happening in Haiti, it's almost always for healing. Hardly ever use puppet magic for destruction. And once again, Mojo bags and charms is basically back to Grigri. It's just a different name for it. Powders and waters are probably the most common form of Mojo, and I've got the word conjure up there, and we think of conjure here in the Western world. We think we're summoning something that has a similar reference, but conjure is really the use of of these possessed materials to create an end result in the world. But you're going to see powders and waters that you'll take waters, and certain waters will open doorways spiritually, and other waters will close them. Some waters will heal, others will destroy. These will be used in a lot of different ways. Sometimes they'll be added to foods or drinks. Sometimes you'll take them in your mouth and then spit them in the direction that you want. You kind of spray them in the direction that you want to have an effect on. If your enemy lives in that direction, you're going to spray it in that general direction, and the spiritual mist will continue in that direction even after the liquid falls. Powders are more for direct contact. This is what's called infectious magic, that you possess the powder with the quality that you want your victim or your target to take on. One example of this is expedition powder, where you get grave dust from the grave of a parricide, somebody who's killed their parents, and or a convicted murderer of any sort really will do. Get their dirt off of the grave, like you have to go down to the point where you're actually scraping it off of their coffin, and you get a skull of a stillborn child, and smash that into a powder. There are a few more elements in there. It's all in the Spider and the Green Butterfly, and then you do this ritual of possession, where you possess this with basically thousands of spirits of the dead. And so they're residing in that powder, and then you take that powder with gloves on, because you never want to touch your skin so it doesn't infect you, and blow that in your enemy's face. And that's been known to have extremely fast infectious qualities, where people will die within usually 24 or 48 hours of that. There's also something similar that happens in Haiti and in Africa, where you can get a stick and possess it by a specific loa, point that stick at somebody, say certain words, and they drop dead within usually a day or two. And it's thought that that could be part of the meme of that culture, that they're so ingrained with the fear of that that's what kills them. But it's also been known to affect people who come from the Western world into that culture as well, that they do something to offend, and then they've got a tumor that grows into the size of grapefruit within a day. And so that's definitely been known and documented. So there is something that's going on with these infectious powders. And once again, it all comes back to the materials being possessed. That it's not just a sympathetic reaction. It's not just that you're getting the elements of a murderer that you're turning into a powder, and since that's a murderer, that there's going to be a sympathetic link between that and the harm to your enemy, but that it's even taken a step farther of being actually possessed by the spirit of aggression. Any questions on that? Now, Bakors and black magic, and this kind of goes back to the Patro rites. And I should be clear, though, that if you're working with the Patro Loa, that does not necessarily make you a black magician. That a Grand Hungan is going to, what they say, work with both hands. That you're going to do good and evil, not necessarily equally, but as is necessary. That you just approach the situations as they need to be approached. Bakors, it would basically be the name for a sorcerer or a priest of a darker alignment, and so a Bakor is mainly going to be chasing after power to the extent that it's destructive to himself and other people, and that's kind of the admonition that's given in just about every religion is, power is fine and dandy, but as soon as you start desiring too much of it, it'll collapse in on you. And that's true, and that's known in Vodou as well. But it's accessing the back doors to power. It's doing things that aren't commonly done. It's the human sacrifice, the ritual orgy, and then calling things out of order, where you're not going to be calling legba, you're not going to be putting the necessary implements into effect for safety, you're just kind of rushing headlong into it. It's accessing the back doors to power. Metcalfu is kind of the lord of the whole operations of black magic and the Bakur's kind of path to spirituality. Now, one important thing is that as a Hungan, you're going to serve the community quite a bit. Now, usually it is for a that you are going to charge for your services. Even in Haiti, where it's absolutely poor, it's going to be like, well, for this I'm going to need 1 chicken or whatever the unit of payment might be. But there's always going to be a method of payment that you can never ever actually do anything for free, mainly because as you do anything for free for other people, they don't appreciate it. As soon as you say, well, you have to give me this, then they're required to give a sacrifice for that service, and then they actually recognize the value of it. But regardless, you're still serving your community in that function. Now, with a Bakur, you're serving yourself. There is no community. The community is not going to come to you, and you're not going to open yourselves up to them. Once again, human sacrifice is a part of this, and a lot of people say no, and that's one of the big contentions I have with a lot of people who teach different things about Vodou and Voodoo have contention with me about, is that they deny that human sacrifice exists at all in any form. It does indeed in Haiti, and once again, one easy way to find out is to go to Haiti and start talking about it, and you'll see how quickly you're nominated to be a human sacrifice. And it's not extremely documentable, but you'll have sure proof. Any questions on any of that? Now, kind of as I think this is the final thought is how this all relates to voodoo, hoodoo, and root work, because that's kind of a catchphrase. Voodoo is that people go, oh, I recognize that. I don't know what this Haitian Vodou is. I don't know what this Congo Zulu religion is, but I sure as hell know what voodoo is. And Marie Laveau came to New Orleans from, I think her father came from Haiti, and he was a Hungan of some sort, or in some way was familiar with the Vodou religion, and taught her some of that. What she basically picked up on was the gree-gree, the mojo, the spell work. Left out the religion, left out how you communicate with these spirits, but just stuck with here's the simple operations that you can do magic with. Now she married Jacques Paris in 1819, and that's really where she started, when she started expanding herself into a public figure of modern voodoo. And really she started to make the whole subject presentable to Westerners. To go, well, okay, I know you guys don't really know much about all this, so she made it as simple as she could and made it much, much more Westernized. Even going as far as rather than Vodou or Vodon and using these words, voodoo. That's an easy word to say. That's something that sticks in people's minds. I think she was really good at marketing, and really made a pretty good niche for herself with that. But it does focus all around the magical practices. Now, voodoo itself is a religion. It's just so, I think, so far divorced from the original African concept that it's not even recognizable as a descendant of that. It is an extremely westernized, modernized version of that religion. And we can see the religions, obviously, with the syncretism that I've kind of pointed out throughout this lecture, that happens, that you have the evolution of religion over time. But this was almost like a forced evolution, rather than it just happening naturally and there's a symbiosis occurring with the indigenous environment, that it was mainly her marketing of this entire path that made it more acceptable for Westerners, that you can have a middle-aged soccer mom that can do voodoo just as easily as somebody born in Africa or Haiti. And that's really appealing to a lot of people. I think, in my opinion, it does focus too much on the magical practices, because from my perspective, I would never call the Loa just to tell them what to do, and call them and say, hey, by the way, here, I want you to go do this and make this change in my life. They're far too powerful for that, and they're far too ancient and conscious for that. That they have their own desires, they have their own consciousness, and they really don't like being bossed around. And mind you, this comes from a culture that's known slavery much more than many other cultures in existence have, and they don't really care for slavery so much. So they're not going to really care for being called up and told exactly what to do. And really, I feel like with a lot of specifically hoodoo and root work, that's what a lot of it is calling them up and telling them what to do, rather than calling them and asking them, hey, you know, what can I do? How can I develop? And what can I do for you and to help my fellow man is a big part of it. Any questions at all? All right, thank you very much. Oh. You mean to mix systems entirely?
Mix systems, but like
in a syncretic type of way?
sort of,
Yeah.
Wouldn't boas still be the same, just being called on by different names?
You know, it's a really, really good question, because I think that takes the conversation away from these Loa as being entities that exist like on another plane, to being fields of consciousness with which we can interact. And the difference really is that like you look at Eshu, which is in Santeria would be, and I think Candomblé, a few other systems, Eshu would be similar to Legba. And it's basically the same original African deity, just kind of syncretized differently in the different cultures that they were in. You can call on them, and you'll be ending up with the same field of consciousness that relates to that, or the field of energy that relates to that. But there's going to be slight differences in that depending on the cultural meme in which you're calling it. Does that make sense? Okay, so yeah, so you can, and you can if you're using like Hinduism, per se, there's never really been a strong syncretic link between Vodou and Hinduism, although you can see an ideological link. You can make that ideological link, and you can you can call on these different entities. You could probably work with Loco as being Ganesh, but you're not going to get Loco, you're going to get Ganesh. You know, it's the same type of, once again, field of consciousness, but it's specific to that paradigm. Does that make sense?
So you could possibly call up different cultures and systems, these together, but you'd have to make sure that they actually mesh well before dealing with
it. And the paradigm and the way in which you would call Ganesh would be different from the way you would call Loco. Even though they have a lot of similarities, you wouldn't want to do a veve and do ram and dancing in the exact same way, and the drumming in the exact same way as you would with Ganesh. Yeah, I mean, you could experiment with that, and I'd love to hear what you get out of that. But that's not; those aren't experiments that I've ever done. But it is an interesting thought, because they are the same field of consciousness. So, any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming here. I appreciate you being here and engaging in this for sure. Thank you.